Okay, so this is a revision lesson for both years 10 and 11 on social inequality, sometimes called stratification. So this is a big mind map for use by anybody really doing sociology, about 10 and 11, covering the very basics of social inequality, for the GCSE courses. First thing to notice here, stratification, inequality, is what's known as a universal. That means that this structure, the pyramid structure of a society, is the same everywhere, at all times. There's no example in human history, not a single one, of any groups that don't have a hierarchy, don't have inequality. They call it different things, different times, class, feudal system, slavery, caste system, whatever you want to call it, it all seems to look the same thing. The big pyramid. Not many people at the top, lots of money and power. More people at the bottom, less money and power. It's a universal. Okay. First we're going to look at other cultures. So there's the caste system in India, which we've done in class. The Brahmins, the royal family, the Brahmins, the priests, warriors, etc., etc., the untouchables. There's things like in the past we have the feudal system in Europe, kings, dukes, bishops, knights, peasants. The slavery system, white slave owners, free whites, house slaves, field slaves. These systems, though, are ascribed. You are put there and you cannot move. In the caste system, in the feudal system, in the slave system, not much or hardly, if any, movement. In the caste system, no movement at all. They're ascribed systems. You are born into your group and you cannot change no matter what. However, we're of course going to spend most of our time studying contemporary Britain. There's also ethnic stratification, ethnic inequality, and gender inequality, but we'll do those separately. The main thing that we study is class inequality, because class has the major effect on your life. No matter which way you look at it, it's the social class you're born into that's going to affect most of your life. It's going to affect things like your life chances, which we'll come on to in a moment. So class affects your life chances. Put simply, we have a middle and a working class. In the classroom, we have that big chart on the national statistics socio-economic classification, middle class 1, middle class 2, professionals, high professionals, low professionals, intermediate, routine, semi-routine, all that business, the class system. But talk of it really originates with Marxists. Karl Marx, the conflict theorists. He said, well, the middle class, he called them the bourgeoisie. They own the means of production, meaning the businesses, the factories, and they exploit the workers for profit. The workers he referred to as the proletariat. They do the work in the factories for wages. So that's the Marxist view of class. Very straightforward, quite old-fashioned these days, but still an important conflict theory. Moving on. Now, I said a minute ago, we do all this because class has a major effect on your life. How? Well, two ways. A, money, both wealth and income. The higher up the class pyramid you are, the more money you have. The more wealth you possess, houses, shares, stuff, the more income you have, the higher wage you are paid. But also, there's your class culture. So class affects your class culture. It affects your life chances. Your chance of getting a good job, nice holidays, being healthy, having a nice house. Yeah? If you are middle class, you've got more chance of living here and less chance of living there. If you are working class as a child, this will be your childhood. If you're middle class, this is your childhood. If you're working class, that might be your holiday. If you're middle class, that might be your holiday. I hope you're getting the message here. Your life chances, your chance of getting what you want from life, your chance of avoiding what you don't. Yeah? Through things like work experience, the middle class get the best jobs. You talked about this before, we'll talk about it more in class. And lastly on this bit, cultural capital. This is part of the how. So he's talked about this in class. If you are middle class, chances are your family give you lots of cultural capital. You go to the Tate Modern. You go to the Tate Britain. You know what this picture is. You know the name of this painting. It makes you more middle class. You fit in with more middle class people. Cultural capital. How many books have you got in your home? Are you read to as a child? Do you think learning is important? We call this cultural capital. And it's using this cultural capital, this cultural wealth, that helps you get better life chances. Okay, moving on. One of the big debates in sociology is the underclass. And the debate is, do they really exist? Now, some people think, yes, they exist, but they exist because there's basically less unskilled work to do. Because of globalisation, sorry, I spelt that wrong, globalisation, there is less unskilled work. Because the unskilled work has gone to India and China and the Philippines. So the underclass are simply a group of people at the bottom of the class pyramid who don't have any work to do in Britain anymore. Others say, well, you know, it exists and it's a big problem. In particular, guys like Charles Murray from America. He says the underclass are a subculture. They have their own norms and values. They don't work. They don't plan to work. They plan to live on benefits. They plan to live in council housing. They don't plan to work. And they socialise, important word here, they socialise their kids into following them. Who's to blame for all this? Well, often these people, Charles Murray and the like, blame the government for giving them too much benefits. A Marxist would say, no, it's capitalism's fault for getting rid of the jobs. That's the debate. Okay, mobility, meaning social mobility, moving within the class pyramid. It exists in our system because it is an achievement-based system, which is called, as you probably, I hope you know now, a meritocracy. But it is not a pure meritocracy. It's meant to be, but it doesn't work out that way. The children of the middle class often end up staying middle class. The children of the working class end up staying working class. That really shouldn't be the case if our meritocracy was working. We do have, though, when mobility occurs, it's usually intergenerational, meaning you are born working class, your family are working class, and through education you become middle class. It's between generations. And finally, there's some work on changes to the class structure in the last few years. So we have one, working class embourgeoisement. Working class people becoming more middle class in a sense. We're talking here about self-employed builders, plumbers. They're definitely working class, but in a lot of their attitudes they're becoming middle class. They have better income, therefore nicer houses, more cars, and they don't feel as working class anymore. And they often don't feel much sympathy for other members of the working class, particularly people who we'd call the underclass. Linked to that is middle class proletarianisation. We have lots more middle class jobs in our culture and our economy than we used to, particularly towards the bottom of the middle class, the intermediate occupations. Things like call centres. They're definitely middle class jobs. You wear smart clothes, you don't get dirty, you're indoors all day, you've got a desk, you've got a phone, you've got a computer, but the work is quite routine. You have to stick to a script. You are being very tightly supervised by your bosses. It's a quiet working class. It's not very well paid. It's not particularly high status. So it's middle class, but not really. And we call this proletarianisation. Look at the underclass again, and then what we have to decide is, in changes to class structure, does it really exist, or is it a red herring, a false clue? In crime fiction, if the crime writer wants you to think that someone did it and they didn't, they'll leave false clues. And we sometimes say the underclass is a red herring, meaning it's not really there, it's just the bottom of the working class. And finally, most recently, we have arisen the idea of the 1%. How in our culture and our economy, the very, very, very richest, the very peak of the pyramid, are becoming fabulously wealthy, and that is distancing them from everybody else. They are more distant, they live in different parts of London, and they live completely separate lives to the rest of us, and that is causing danger in our culture. We lose value consensus, we lose stability. The 1%.